Welcome back to the Blindsiders. I am Ben here with Brian Dillon to talk about the finale of Survivor 50. It's a huge season. We've been anticipating it for basically a full year now, and it has finally come to a close. We have our winner of Survivor 50, four-time player Aubrey Bracco, and I think a lot of us kind of like started, I think, towards the last week or two to see the writing on the wall, especially after last week with Devins and Suri going out and kind of like reevaluating the final five. I think a lot of us probably expected this result coming in, but yeah, we are closing out the season. We have a lot to talk about here with the finale episode, the season as a whole. Aubrey as a winner, the rest of the cast, So where do we want to start, gentlemen? Where do we want to start?
Don't start with me.
Start with you. No, what? I was going to say, let's start with you.
I think that you're going to have a much more positive outlook on what occurred last night, and I think that I am very much going to bring the mood down a lot. So I want you to do. I want you.
That's
to
usually my
enjoy
job.
this
So
moment. You're an Aubrey. You're a big Aubrey fan. You had a good night last night. I want.
Yeah, let's take it from there. I was a huge Aubrey fan in Go Wrong. I rooted for her in Game Changers. I was gutted when she got completely dunked on Edge of Extinction. And the beginning of this season, I really was like, shit, it's going to go bad again. This is embarrassing to be an Aubrey fan at this point. And I want to say I wasn't one of those annoying Aubrey fans who was like, she should have beat Michelle. It was more just like, I liked Aubrey more. I wish she had won, but Michelle played a good game. She deserved to win. So having Aubrey come back and win in a way that now she's on the opposite end of, did they deserve to win conversations is very interesting. Who knew that stuff would work out? But I think when we get some distance from 50, it will be a good closing the book of that pre-40 era. We got a lot of callbacks. We got Suri playing amazing and then being, a fallen angel in sixth place. We got Ozzy and Coach's beef carrying over from 23. We got Ozzy getting blindsided again with an idol. We had the last appearance, most likely, of Colby, Coach, Ozzy, Stephanie. And then we got the end to Aubrey's Survivor story. And I do think Aubrey now especially is a legend of Survivor. She is an important part of the history of Survivor, and her win caps off this story of the first 50 seasons. And now we can go into 51 with a lot of the storylines tied up from that era and kind of, start anew. Although Jeff in the promo said that there's going to be potentially every twist that ever happened in the history of Survivor, which I don't think is good. And I think they should, just trust in the people they cast to deliver a good season. But hey, I'll complain about 51. I'm sure a lot while 51's airing. But right now, I want to say I liked season 50. I thought it was a good ending. And yeah, they could have done a better job with Aubrey's edit to give it to us a little bit more. But I think they built some stuff in this season. This whole season's theme was learning from your past mistakes. Charlie set it up in the pre-merge for Rizzo of he didn't have time to watch his previous season. So how is he ever going to be able to fix his mistakes? Aubrey fixed her mistakes in terms of she got the win. I don't know if she specifically corrected what she did wrong and Go Wrong, but she found a way to win. I was very happy with it. That's my spiel. Dylan, you can now have the floor and take down season 50 as much as you'd like.
Ben, do you have anything you want to add before we get into that?
No, I actually don't disagree too much with what Brian said. I've been notably very down on Aubrey, especially coming into the season. She was in my bottom three people that I was the least interested in seeing come back because we've just seen her so much. The stat of she's returned in every possible returning player season that she's eligible for. She is tied with Boston Rob for the fastest player to return for a fourth time. It's just it seemed very a lot for us to get so much Aubrey in the last, decade or so. But I've also, been hard on her both as a player and primarily the like storytelling that the show has done around her for like the first 7 or 8 episodes is not really like giving her any like rootable kind of credit. But I do think that the idea of everybody like this being more a story of how everyone else lost because they couldn't correct their past mistakes, whereas like Aubrey made like a concerted effort to change the way she played. Like I think that's like an interesting story, and I think that the like narrative of Aubrey like kind of being on the opposite side of the like Michelle argument now is really kind of very fun. Even if it hopefully like we saw a lot, especially in this finale, of Aubrey being like, oh, I struggled with the internet's reaction to both myself as a player and Korong as a season. And I hope that Aubrey can like close the internet because I feel like I've been harsh, but there was like considerably harder people than me that are saying way like more personally mean things. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's there's an interesting kind of way that we can talk about the season, and I agree. Talking about Rizzo, I think like Rizzo losing at Fire again, Joe becoming like the final tribal council goat again, like Jonathan potentially making similar mistakes, even though he did change his game a little bit. Suri kind of falling into the same pattern that she does, where she like can't make it through that end game because she her threat level is too high. Ozzy being blindsided with the idol again. Devon's being too much of a big character, so he again can't control his threat level. Like there's like every other player on the season to a degree made very similar mistakes to the mistakes they made last time, at least the ones that made it deepish into the game. And so I think that that's kind of ultimately going to be the story of the season. But yeah, for me, the finale episode itself, not particularly fun or compelling or interesting, but I think like it did kind of tie as well a narrative bow as it could onto this season. So I don't know. We'll see. What are your thoughts, Dylan?
Yeah, last night sucked. It was a bad day, bad night to be a Survivor fan. I've been really off my game all day today. I'm not happy. I am ultimately sad Survivor 50 is ending because obviously this has been such a fun couple months for us. We've talked about it before. Fun time for me with my brother, my wife, my family watching Survivor. That's been really great. I went to a watch party that was a lot of fun. Our channel or the show has gotten better. We have shout out Brian Wong, shout out Scott, shout out Lauren, shout out Daryl, shout out Brent, everybody that have been contributing to the podcast, watching, commenting, giving feedback. Like Brian Wong every week gave me like a written text that was like feedback about our show and like things that he agreed with, things that he liked. He always asked why Ben never wanted to shout him out. It was like all very funny. Like, so we've had a lot of fun these past few months, and I'm definitely nothing's going to take away from that. And I think all that was just really great. And I think a lot of that blinded me to what was happening in this show. And I think you guys, being the seasoned vets that you are, probably caught on to it a little bit early. And I also think you're kind of numb to Survivor just being absolute dog shit. And I think I have been awoken to what has occurred. Last night was a complete travesty, and I feel like it was almost kind of like the actual nail in the coffin, complete death of Survivor. And I am not talking about Aubrey winning. I personally, overall, I am happy for Aubrey, the player. I think, and have been saying it, and I said it last week, I think Jonathan played a much better season overall than her. But I actually think, and so I saw somebody else bring this up, and I agree, and I think it's an interesting comparison. I think I compared to Aubrey's win. a lot to Sandra in Heroes versus Villains in the sense that she played the game of just being the last one to survive that I think people like that they would have voted for. And I think ultimately the people that were on the jury hated the remaining players that were being John and Joe. I don't know why I just call them Jonathan and Joe. And I think Jonathan kind of draws that Parvati Russell card in that comparison too. If obviously Aubrey is Sandra, is that I think clearly a majority of the jury did not like Jonathan or respect his game, which that's Survivor. So, I'm not going to sit here and cry about that and cry about how Final Tribal really ultimately sucked. It was just kind of the jury, like the two factions that were split on the jury warring with each other. And it was obviously very clear that they came into this vote split knowing who they're going to vote for. And I think that ultimately it made for a really bad Final Tribal for this season. I think the players did okay, but I think, we've talked about before, the Final Tribal format, it sucks. It is not good for this game. I think that was bad, but like you said, the episode was ultimately just really boring. Just not a good episode of Survivor, kind of just a wet fart ending to the season. We've started at the highs of highs, and we had a lot of really, really good episodes in between. Like we praised several of the episodes in this season were the best episodes that Survivor had given us of the past five years, maybe even longer than that. So I'm not taking away from that. I think it was very clear to me Jeff did not want to do a live reunion. I think it really capped off the complete scam and bamboozle that was in the hands of the fans this season. We didn't get a live reunion. We got some airtime spent with players that we had seen the most of and heard the most of from during the entire year. We didn't get to hear about Charlie talking about, what he thought of Rizzo now that he knows what he knows. We didn't get to catch up with Kyle or Savannah and get really any sort of feedback there. I don't know why they bothered wasting money and time on production. I think it's because they knew there was no way that they could twist the fans who I imagine overwhelmingly voted to have this be a live reunion. They knew that there was no way for them to be able to twist this to a way that Jeff and production wanted it to be. So what we got the traditional set and the live thing and all that, but we I think the Rizzo thing was the highlight of the night. And I personally don't think it was manufactured to create kind of like the tweets and they go viral. I don't think Jeff would set himself up to look foolish like that. And I've definitely thought about it though, of because we've seen Survivor kind of throw themselves out there, whore themselves out there to the likes, which I think it's very clear from the season. Paramount has a much bigger say in what goes on in this game than what we thought that they did. And I can see maybe ultimately that's why I don't think Jeff will ever step down, because I think that if he does, the execs at Paramount and CBS would completely destroy this show. So I don't think last night with forgetting Rizzo was his fault. I think that was a production stage management fault. I think it ultimately made the fire making challenge more interesting. Like I don't, rather than just seeing him get blown out. So it was just, and it was not a fun night. Now that I woke up after having about 6 or 7 margaritas, and kind of dealt with that this morning. But I had a lot of fun last night. I had a lot of fun this season. I'm not going to let it ruin it, but I really feel like a lot of the talk now is going to be, I think the edit around Aubrey was pretty terrible, but I also think that Aubrey was playing a really, really bad game at the beginning of the season, and they knew that they were eventually going to have, when they finished filming, they knew they're going to have to edit her in a way that seems like a winning format. But ultimately, Aubrey played a game where she made sure she wasn't the one voted out. She kind of just survived until the end, and she knew, and I think that she knew she would have the support of the likes of the Suri and the new era players, plus the old school players that didn't really fall in line with like that Zoom honor and integrity alliance. And I think that that's smart of her, and I'm not going to knock her for that, but I don't find this a particularly exciting win. And so I think when you say, Brian, that she has kind of put herself in, I know this isn't verbatim like the all-time greats, but she's up there in like Survivor history and legacy. And I agree with that, but I don't think it is as sexy as you're making it sound. I feel like, she got that win, but it doesn't feel ultimately, I'm very big on every winner deserved it because they did what they needed to do to get the jury to vote for them. You know, but even you can say Gabler didn't deserve it. I think Gabler deserved it. I think Aubrey deserves it this season. I just think what we got as a viewer was really horrible, but then ultimately maybe that was all that they had to work with. So I think it's sad. And I think the reason I'm more sad is we saw the preview for 50 and I feel like that they are now, you know, they gave us an inch and now they're going to take 10 feet back with this season. And that I ultimately really not that excited for 51, but I think there's, like I said, there's more to dissect about the game and the season as a whole in this episode. And so I definitely want to talk about that. And I want to keep ranting so you guys can talk too, but that's pretty much where I'm at. And it's kind of a really shitty feeling to say. And I know we were texting earlier today and Ben, you said, obviously, you know, it took me just 5 years to get onto what you guys have kind of suffered through now going on 20 years or, you know, 15, 10 years, whatever long it's been since Survivor has really kind of like fell apart for you guys. And it's a very sinking feeling that the show that you love the most in the world really is just, they're no longer, I don't think they really care about the viewers like us, of the people that are normal, massive fans of the show. You know, they're not the kind of ridiculous over the top super fans, and they're not the casual viewers that they so desperately want right now. I feel like the actual like real fan of Survivor is kind of being just completely lost to what they're trying to capture now. And I think that's a very sad and isolating feeling because ultimately their ratings have been, thank you, Brent. Their ratings have been very, very good these past couple of years. And I think that they have no interest in tweaking anything to go back to what it was before. And I think they're just going to keep the status quo. And I think that that's bad for like the actual gameplay of Survivor overall. But I am looking forward to us three talking though, and getting kind of like your thoughts on what I said and thoughts of like what went on last night. But yeah, that's unfortunately where I'm at. But like I said, I don't want it to take away from the season. We had a lot of fun this year. Our podcast did really good with a lot of this, and I do want to carry that momentum forward. But I am sad for what 50 started as, what 50 could have been, and what we ultimately ended up getting.
Yeah, I mean, I hate the ratings argument. I think that like TV ratings, especially nowadays, are completely worthless. It's so much of TV ratings are built upon just like the inherent variance of counter programming or like the year to year like fluctuations in TV viewership patterns. And like this has even been the case pretty like in the long standing, famously in Big Brother, but Survivor as well, but Big Brother in particular. A lot of the worst seasons have gotten the best ratings, and vice versa. Big Brother 10 in particular is widely considered to be one of the best seasons of Big Brother, and it has some of the worst ratings in the history of the franchise compared to like the seasons around it. So like it just like ratings, like tying ratings to the quality of the product is just like it's demonstrably not correct. But ultimately, within the industry, the networks are going to tie ratings to success, which is unfortunate because it basically just like leads the production to basically like fall into these like false positive traps where like they do something and it's successful like despite the thing they do, but then they like convince themselves that the thing that they did was the reason that it happened, which I think happened a lot this season with a lot of the twists, where they would introduce a twist and then kind of despite the twist, something interesting would happen strategically. And then the show would be like, look at how great the twists are doing. They're creating these great TV moments for the season. It's like, no, it's just that the cast is really good and they're all playing really hard. And if there were zero twists, the cast would still be really good and they'd still be playing really hard and we'd still be getting really compelling strategy and really compelling gameplay because it's an all-star cast. Like you really just didn't need all of these twists, and the twists have kind of like suppressed a lot of the parts of the season that were actually really good, in my opinion.
Idols is the biggest one for me. I think the biggest flop by far was the Billie Eilish Boomerang Idol, which I'm a proud owner of the replica of. But I like to have season 50 be a celebration of Survivor, a celebration, and they kind of really completely just kneecapped idols, which, you know, for a better part of 40 plus seasons now have been a huge staple in the game. And we've had some of our best moments happen with like actual idol plays. And you had somebody in this season who found 2 idols, which is insane. And one, neither of the idols that she found mattered at all, and then 2, the person that found them was exited early out of the game. And so I think the lack of like any sort of intriguing idol play, and like I don't think you need idols to make Survivor fun and exciting, but I think it's been such a huge staple to the game. They could have done something totally different, but they apparently wanted the 10 Survivor viewers to go from watching Survivor to watching the Billie Eilish movie, and those other 10 people coming from the Billie Eilish fandom to come watch Survivor. Like it was stuff like that, because I agree, Ben. A lot of these episodes where we had really dumb twists ultimately ended up turning into very, very good episodes, but it all came down to the cast, not the twist. The only one I'll give credit to the twist was I thought, obviously the Mr. Beast one was fun. That was more of a gimmick rather than necessarily a twist of the game. Obviously, it was like very crazy that somebody could have just went home from a flip of a coin. But I think the what was the one that Jonathan got at the end? What was it called? The
Power Broker.
The Power Broker. I do think that one was interesting. That's one I maybe wouldn't mind seeing again and can find a way to make it interesting. But I thought that was a twist that added an interesting element to it. But ultimately, yeah, we said it so many times. We've been saying it all of the new era. The twists are ridiculous, and then very unfortunately now next season they're embracing all the twists and all the really dumb. Like if I see an hourglass next season, I'm going to lose my mind.
Yeah, I definitely get what you're saying. I think for me, what's helped me, and obviously this is like from watching the show since I was 8 years old, consistently through, and being able to kind of be like, okay, that show that I fell in love with as a kid is not the same show that I'm watching now, even though it has the same host, the same aesthetic, buffs, sometimes the same characters in all-star seasons. It's a very inherently different game. They used to really, really trust in the cast to make the moments, and they did time and time again. So many compelling human moments from, Rich and Sue having an argument about the office culture leader style versus the Bush style things. To, Alicia wagging a finger in Kimmy's face all the way, to today. I think that if Survivor ever wants to get back to where it was, it just has to trust that the cast people who are going to deliver interesting television,
I'm not going to judge a book by its cover, 51, but it feels like that we're going back to kind of that typical, theater super fan geek nerd like trope, which is like, I think it's important to have that side, to have that player, along with it's important to have like the Joes and the Tiffany's and that side of Survivor too. But it feels like we're kind of going back to those very bland paint by numbers casting that we had early on in the new era, and that is very much uninteresting to me. I think the more interesting players we have gotten from the new era, everyone at this point is a super fan. Like everyone who loves Survivor and has been trying to play it for 20 plus years, like everybody is a super fan. But I think now, like Camilla's a super fan. Was Camilla's whole bit when she was on her season that she was a super fan and when she was playing that way? No, she was so hell-bent on being this little sneaky snake, and like it made her awesome. But I feel like, once again, judging a book by its cover, that's all I can do right now. I feels like a lot of the preview we got for season 51 seemed like, and it's really tough coming off a returning player season, seemed like we're kind of getting that same, everybody who's cast is the exact same type of player ordeal, which we dealt with so much early on in the early 40s. I feel like casting got a little bit better around like 45 for that season. Obviously, it gave us one of the best winners of the new era. But I am not at all excited for 51 purely because of that whole like the open era, whatever the hell that means, of them. They're taking it. Everything is cat's out the bag, and apparently, yeah, they're going to be doing 2 tribes again. I would be shocked if that lasted longer than like 3 episodes. So it's tough for me to get excited about 50, but we can talk our 51. We can talk about 51, at the end of the summer when it's time to start discussing that season.
Yeah, I will say like the one thing about the description of 51 and the like coming era or whatever that at the very least makes me somewhat cautiously optimistic is the idea that like they might be moving away from repetitive kind of formulaic vibe that the new era kind of fell into, where 9 seasons in a row in the 40s we got 3 tribes of 6, usually no swap, or if they did a swap, it was like a very like kind of weird like 2 players swap kind of situation, or like a dissolve kind of situation, but mostly no swaps. Beware advantages, the same kind of like thing where like at the end of the season they would send them to a new beach to the point where it became like a meme where they predicted they were going to come to a new beach, so they all brought their stuff to the tribal council so that they would be able to go from tribal council to the new beach. You'd have the like final 5. You'd get everyone runs into the woods and looks for an advantage for the final 5 challenge. So like one of the great things I think about 50 was it was like, even though they still did 3 tribes and there were still like a lot of silly twists, it broke that kind of formulaic boundary that we had kind of gone into a rut of for 9 seasons straight, where every single season kind of felt indistinguishable from the last. So if this idea of unpredictability being kind of the theme of the 50s results in, at the very least, each season seeming distinct from the other seasons around it, I think that at the very least will be an improvement on the new era. But hold on, we'll see. We'll see. I am worried because the idea of like we're going to pull from every part of Survivor and like throw all of these twists into a witch's brew and then see what happens. There's been a lot of really bad twists and game design elements that Survivor has used over the years, and they should not redo some of them. So like, we'll see. It's going to be highly dependent upon like which elements they include, but I hope at the very least it means that 51 and 52 feel like different seasons, which is not the case for 41 and 42.
I am going in hopeful. I'm very negative right now, but I will, when we talk again about 51, in September or August, whenever we're going to talk about it, I will be way more hopeful and more excited for it. But it's tough. It's tough to do that right now when you're coming off of what happened on 50, and then they're also like the Survivor Mario Party, right? That's been thrown around a lot. I've seen it on the internet, and Brian brought it up of like that makes me nervous, but also I'm now just completely a broken person and numb to everything like you guys have been for a while now. That it will be the furthest thing from like actual Survivor to what we've gotten to this point, which that is maybe that'll work, and maybe that'll be best for the show to just start because another big problem we have with a lot of these seasons too is it basically has turned into like this like LARPing fest of Survivor super fans, like they're being able to fill out their dream, which is great. And then you had a player like Rizzo who like pretty much lived out like the ultimate Survivor super fans dream of playing in back-to-back seasons, playing in season 50, partnering with Suri and Ozzy. Like that's the dream. But like early 40s, it all felt like it was like faux Survivor, like a LARPing ordeal. So like if they can take this, and now it's just gonna be Survivor by name, they kind of turn it into this real fun, just like wacky show, I will probably hate it in terms of viewing it from a lens of a Survivor fan. But I guess from somebody who does kind of want more of like the messier side of reality TV now, if that can bring us that, then great. Because obviously like we've seen shows like Traders where the gameplay, the actual like challenges and gameplay matter much less to what is like going on socially. And so if they can find a way to make it work like that, then I guess that's an interesting thing. I don't know. I don't want to waste too much time on 51, but that's my thought on that.
Have a few more margaritas between now and 51. You'll be fun. Very funny.
Very true.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ben, you go. Sorry.
No, Brian, I want to know your thoughts, I guess, like on I guess like how you kind of view like the way that the end game like here plays out, especially like Aubrey versus Jonathan. Because like I have my own kind of like view on why we ended up here and like how it kind of like, you know, how it I don't know how to say this, like how it represents the modern way to play Survivor, or maybe like Survivor as a whole, but like, I kind of want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so that's funny. I was talking to my dad. Obviously, he was an old school fan, like, you know, grew up, watched Survivor with me. Didn't watch Survivor probably from Heroes versus Villains to season 50. So there was a lot of me giving him background on all the changes and stuff this season. And one of the things that I, you know, was talking to him about was like trying to explain what Jeff was implying with the vote for the final four, whether it was going to be fire making or vote. And I was like talking to him like, well, people felt like that a final two was tough because the biggest threat would go out at 3. So then they added a final 3, and then the biggest threat would go out on 4. So they added fire making. Now the biggest threat often just goes at the middle of the merge because you don't want to let them get to fire making. And I feel like because Survivor didn't trust in its original format and they tried to iterate on it, they ended up trying to do, and you know, you're right, Code Ben. I'm sure this kind of makes sense. Hopefully I don't, but I'm trying to go there. They put so many tweaks to fix like problems in this moment that it caused a cascading effect of like, this is now what Survivor is, and we're never gonna have someone run the game from wire to wire again. Even Suri, as great as she is, she controlled a lot of this game and she came in 6th place. That's just Survivor now. Like, we talked about it a lot, ironically, on 42, where every time someone emerged as the biggest threat, they immediately got their head lopped off, and then Marianne ended up winning. And I feel like that's just what you have to expect from Survivor now. And we're just going to have to judge the show based on that, because the show put itself into this corner and refused to admit that they put themselves into the corner. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, even before the new era, I think Edge of Extinction is another example of a season that is very much like this. And it also ends up in a very weird end game where you have a guy who was in the game for like 4 hours winning the season because he happened to like come in right at the end of the game and sit at the end against 2 people the jury didn't respect. And like, you know, I think like, you know, Aubrey does invoke Chris Underwood's name in her final speech, and I think there is like elements of that in what Aubrey does here, right? Where like obviously Aubrey's in the game for the entire time, but like she doesn't go to a tribal council for the first like 7 episodes. Like, so in a certain way, there is like kind of an element of that, and then also, yeah, you know, obviously comparisons to Michelle, who also does not go to any pre-merge tribal councils and go wrong. Where like having a cushion like that allows you to not have to start thinking about playing the game really until like halfway through the game. And when the game is kind of iterating in this way where things are happening on like a 1 to 2 round basis at most, and there are long-term alliances, obviously, like you have like the Rick Christian Emily alliance, you have like the Serena Ozzy alliance, like there are like alliances, obviously, like the reference Zoom alliance or whatever you'd like to call it, the honor and integrity alliance, like that. There are alliances and kind of like these voting blocks, what have you, but like as far as the the vote-to-vote decisions, it felt very, we're going to take out the person that we think is like the most threatening to our game right now. And yeah, with that in mind, it does very much open the door to a win like this happening more often than not, where you have, I would say, this trio of players in Joe, Jonathan, and Rizzo who kind of coalesce in the mid to late merge as a trio. And none of them are particularly well liked or respected by the rest of this post-merge cast. And I think that they all recognize that to a degree, which is why they teamed up and were like, hey, we have to go to the end as a trio, and that's the only way that any of us three of us can win. And that kind of puts those players with agency into like a really narrow path where they cannot make a single mistake or like drop a single ball. Otherwise, a player who is not exercising agency but is, you know, more well liked or well respected socially, partially because they're not having to make a lot of these hard decisions, is able to kind of like, you know, snatch the win from him at the last second, which is kind of what happens here with Aubrey. And I think that's like a really kind of interesting dynamic. And I think that it also can create frustrating outcomes from a viewer perspective, because we are seeing Jonathan, Rizzo, Joe, with like Jonathan kind of being like the main focus, but Rizzo to a secondary degree has gotten a lot of, you know, focus as a strategic element in the season, kind of maneuvering a lot of this end game after Suri kind of loses some power. And to us as the viewer, we're like, well, they're the ones exercising agency. They should be rewarded. One of the three of them should be rewarded with the win. Whereas Aubrey has kind of just like been incidentally on the back foot, not really had any major agency, was at best a fourth in a 3-person alliance. And like the times where like she's purporting to have exercised agency was just instances where people decided to vote other people out instead of her because they were perceived as bigger threats, which obviously threat management is a skill. So that's like, I think, a less satisfying narrative for an eventual winner on average. And I think that's kind of what we're ending up with here. But I do think this trio did make an unforced error at the final 6. I talked about last week. I think voting out Suri over Aubrey was just objectively a mistake. There's pretty much no reason that I could be convinced of to not take Suri to the final 4. You're out as a trio is to get to the end as a trio. None of you can win if you don't get to the end as a trio. The best way to accomplish that is to bring the worst challenge performer to the final 4 with you. That person was Suri. Obviously, Suri wins, 1 million to 0 if she's in a jury vote, but like that doesn't matter, right? Like whether Suri gets the entire world to all vote for her and like blows you out 5 quadrillion to nothing versus Aubrey beating you 8-3, you're losing either way. It doesn't matter. So like you just needed to bring Suri to the final 4, and they didn't do that. They made a mistake, and they opened a path for Aubrey, and she did enough to fulfill that path.
Yeah, I think once again, I defended voting out Suri because obviously there's just the danger of, one, if there is no fire and you get there and she's in a situation where it's Joe, Rizzo, Suri, and Jonathan, where I can see how that can be disastrous for them. But I don't know how strongly they thought Rizzo and Suri were playing at that point. So maybe like that was a miscalculation by them. I do think, but I do agree overall, clearly seeing how it played out, that voting Aubrey out at that tribal and or Tiffany. I know you couldn't vote out Tiffany, right? Tiffany had immunity. So voting out Aubrey there was probably the safer move to then have Suri more likely than not, which, by the way, I did not vote for fire. Like, did a lot of people vote for fire and I just completely missed that? And I thought that Go ahead.
Again, it's push polls, right? All of the polls were the thing that the production wanted was, do you want the exciting, fire that gives players a chance to fight for their life, or do you want a boring vote where players just get randomly put aside because they didn't, get to save themselves with fire? It's like, do you want the good thing that means you're a cool, awesome person, or are you a fucking loser, right? Like, that's literally every single, other than like the colors for the tribes, like every single, question that was asked in those polls was worded that way, so that like it was heavily pushing the, kind of very, I don't want to be insulting to the viewing audience, but push polls work for a reason, right? People are very easy to manipulate by just like wording things differently. And the vast majority of people aren't thinking that like, oh, I'm being manipulated by the wording of this question. So that's just how it is. It's they know what they were doing. They manipulated the polls not through making up numbers, but through wording the polls in a way where everyone is going to vote for the thing they wanted by them writing it so that sounded like the more interesting option.
Disgusted. So, this democracy that we've been told is a lie.
I mean, Ben's right. And we said it when it happened. We were like, the wording of these are pretty bad. And the fact that fire got 60%, and maybe we're out of touch and we don't understand. Sure, that's possible. But 60% was pretty definitive. So I think it did have more to do with the wording of it. Brent asks, what would have happened if they voted out Aubrey instead of Tiff? I assume at the final 5, Tiff wins, I think.
I mean, I don't know how good Tiff is at Submotion.
Right.
Submotion's kind of a random challenge that has like a very specific like skill set. And apparently Aubrey did a lot of practicing on Submotion in the preseason.
Yeah, I need to get my own home one because that'd be fun to play.
100% the right move by her, obviously. Yeah. I did not want to hear that. Did not want to hear Aubrey buying Submotion, voting for Submotion, and guarantee. Like, is it the 100% right thing for her to do? Yes. Did I want to hear that from her shortly after hearing that or her winning? No, I didn't. I
mean, that's again the consequence of they all knew what the final account or the final immunity challenge was going to be, because like again they put Submotion there. And like, I'm sick of Submotion. I think we've seen it way too many times, especially in the new era. I thought that the season was 36 or 46. I mean, the 46, which was like a version of Submotion, but with the puzzle aspect, was much more visually interesting. But like, when I saw those 3 options, I was like, damn, they're going to do Submotion again. Submotion's going to win. And so like, yeah, they had basically told all of the players before the season what the final Unity challenge was going to be. So yeah, everyone should have practiced Submotion.
By the way, I did look it up. You can get it on Etsy. It's it's all 3D printed. Doesn't look like the Submotion, obviously, with the cage and the metal, but it looks like it almost looks like a. Yeah, like a water slide almost of like just thick 3D printed material, which I guess I just described what Submotion looks like, which everybody here knows what Submotion looks like.
Yeah. I've played versions of Submotion in like live games and stuff like that, but like
really?
It's smaller versions, like tabletop versions, like tinier balls, but like it's more so like the vibe of it is like you just have to never lose focus and like be very good at like staggering the balls and like the timing of it all. It's very easy to learn.
Once again, none of this is Aubrey's fault, so none of my anger is directed at Aubrey. She 100% the right thing to do, just not what I wanted to hear in the moment after she wins what is ultimately a massive final challenge. Like kind of massive for the landscape of where the game's going to go after that. Not what I want to hear of her being like, yeah, I voted for it and then I practiced it. Like, yeah, self-explanatory. I'm totally fine that happened. That's the right thing you should do. I just not the thing I want to hear after your first big win. But it's good for Aubrey. bad for Jonathan, Joe, and Rizzo in that point. For no shock though, Rizzo was seemingly no chance. So did Jonathan go out first though, right? I think Jonathan
went out first. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so something Brent and I also talked about that I brought up here. Do you think that the fact that Aubrey was an old school player helped her get this win in the sense that they didn't want new school, or do you think Jonathan's being like associated with the old school players kind of made that moot?
I think the second part. I think that I would like to see a world where Rizzo is there instead of Aubrey, and it's Rizzo, Jonathan, Joe, because I think that Rizzo might have had a better chance than we thought, because I think it came down to the two factions warring between the Zoom Alliance, which every returning player season has pre-gaming. It's been confirmed by multiple people that have been on returning player seasons. So I don't necessarily know why the other side would call that out and be so upset. It kind of seems like Steph and Chrissy were being pretty unbearable with it. I imagine maybe back at Ponderosa, and then they clearly were in Final Tribal. So I think ultimately it came down to there was two different factions at the end here. And I think that it was going to be whoever was not on the Jonathan side was going to win, whoever was there.
Yeah. I mean, I think like a little column A, a little column B, but like primarily, yeah, it did come down to just like the anti-Jonathan more so than like I think we all were leaning towards, if it was the three guys in the final three before this episode, that we all thought that Jonathan would win somewhere around like 6-5 or 7-4 against Rizzo. After this episode, I feel pretty confident that Rizzo would have won that final three, just based off of the jury's reaction to Jonathan. Like, I think that like I think Rizzo has more of like a lovable annoyance to him that like people would be more willing to overlook compared to Jonathan, who I think that a lot of the jury just like flatly did not like. So I think even maybe Joe is able to catch a vote or two in that kind of a final three, which
That's
is
what I
really
thought too. Yeah.
so yeah.
I also think too, it really comes down to like I can't blame the whole like Zoom Alliance thing and Chrissy and Steph kind of just being really obvious about it at Final Tribal. Jonathan still very early on when we got to start having merge boots that he was not managing them well. Like I think he came off, whether he was intentional or not, he came off as a dick with Christian. You know, he had the whole blow up with D, which I can't tell if Christian's reaction to finding out that Jonathan planned that all or not was genuine, or he was kind of mocking him when he's like, oh, so you planned for that D blow up, and Christian, because you know how Christian gets all wide eyed and very into it. I think that's just kind of how he talks to people. Seemed very surprised and maybe impressed by it if he wasn't mocking him. But I think that and for right or wrong for being upset about certain reasons, I think Tiff ultimately did not like Jonathan. I think that she also felt a little bit, which anybody with a competitive bone in their body knows, when you immediately lose something as big as that, when you previously had Jonathan, Aubrey, and Joe all actively in Rizzo, trying to beat you in a challenge. I think Tiff's reaction to Jonathan was fine. But I think ultimately she didn't like Jonathan either and didn't really respect the game that he was playing. And that comes down to being Jonathan's fault. Whether it is, you know, if it has anything with everything else today, either has to do with race politics or something else along those lines. Like clearly, I think that affects players in these games too. But that's also that is a snapshot of what our society is right now too. So I'm not even necessarily upset about that because it's a social game and that's how these things work. But I think a lot of it just came down to that. And I agree. I think that if it's a Jonathan, Joe, Rizzo final, I think that Rizzo had a much better chance than I thought. I think Suri probably would have talked to Ozzy in the red. Like Suri was clearly driving that other side, which Suri knows this game better than anybody else. And I think that if they wanted to keep that legacy player winning, like Aubrey, ultimately I'm fine with it. It's the production did us in more than what occurred on Final Tribal and with the cast and all that. So long-winded answer. I don't think anything changes if Aubrey or Tiff are there, and I don't think anything. And I think the only thing that changes if it's and like Rizzo kind of fills that same side for that faction. And unfortunately, just Joe was the odd man out, which everybody kind of knew.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the final council didn't matter, right? But like, I think that what ultimately kind of happens in a lot of these cases with these final tribal councils, where there's like kind of a predetermined outcome because everyone kind of knows who they're voting for or supporting coming in, and it's unlikely that people are going to change their minds, is instead of like trying to ascertain information to determine who the best player is, what jurors will do frequently will be to kind of like massage some kind of narrative to soothe their own ability to feel good about voting for the person that they just like or respect more, by like kind of finding reasons as to why they can convince themselves that they played the best game. And like that's pretty, I think, frequent that happens just across the board with jurors. I think that's just like kind of a human nature thing where like people will make up their minds a certain way for emotional reasons and then just try to like retroactively rationalize and justify it. So like that's kind of why I also talked at the time about with the Aussie boot, like where I didn't really think that it super mattered who like actually had credit for the Aussie boot, because we saw it kind of play out in this final trial council. What ended up happening was Tiffany, who was like kind of the main voice of the pro Aubrey contingency in the jury, basically just like manufactured Aubrey being the person who drove that vote by like kind of manipulating Joe a little bit into like agreeing with her narrative. And again, that's not like, that wasn't Tiffany trying to be like, I need to find out objectively who controlled the Aussie boot because that will, you know, determine for me who played the best game or be a you know, check mark on their resume. That was Tiffany is supporting Aubrey because she likes Aubrey and wants Aubrey to win for personal and emotional reasons, which are also valid, obviously. Like it's a social game that plays into it, and so she is going to try to massage the narrative of what happened with that vote to justify to herself and the other jurors that Aubrey played a good enough game to be somebody that they can support as a winner. And that's just that's how jury votes go. That's how they've always gone. And I think like a lot of the like, you know, the discussion that fans do, like kind of post hoc, is like kind of also playing the same game of justifying like who voted for who for what reason and like who played the best game because of like this, that, or the third. When like ultimately it just comes down to who is the most respected, who is the most liked, and a lot of the justification kind of falls from there.
The best player does not always win Survivor, but there's a difference between the right player winning Survivor and the best player winning Survivor each season. Obviously, like more often than not, the best player of each season goes out, you know, 6-5, like it goes out sometimes long before you get to the final three, final two. So I that's why I will never knock Aubrey for her win this season. But it's also the frustrating part too, is that I wish we had more to celebrate for, because Aubrey winning should be a big deal. And I think that, you know, a lot of the discussion around Aubrey early on, at least for me, I would need to go back and re-listen to our podcast where we did our draft and when we talked about who was revealed. I was not like super intrigued by Aubrey ultimately. She was kind of like very much fell in like the middle for me, where it was cool to see her there, right? And she was an alternate too, which Aubrey was Amanda's replacement.
That is the speculation.
So, you know, that's like I was very indifferent on Aubrey, and I think that's saying best coming into the season. So And I was very negative on Suri, and like what we got with Suri. Suri was the the MVP of the season, along with her and Devins, who I was not very high on either. So some pleasant surprises there, but I think it's just, I don't know. I go back to the Aussie thing. The season gameplay wise really kind of completely fell apart when Aussie decided to become Aussie again. I think a lot of it falls apart there because I think that ultimately I always really like a nice dominant win. I think having a final five of Suri, Aussie, Rizzo, Tiffany, I think that makes a really intriguing kind of dilemma of who's Suri going to take there. If Suri can somehow, or like, are they going to have the balls to take out Suri when they get to final challenge and Suri doesn't win? I think that could have been a really, really interesting dilemma. Like, would it maybe have been boring to kind of get to that point there if we started to just have them chip away at Jonathan and Joe and Aubrey? Yeah, probably. But I think that end game was probably the most satisfying to what we would have had storytelling wise that season. I think it creates like a dilemma for Suri too. But it seems like from her exit interviews, she felt very, very, very confident that that Ozzy and Tiffany would take her to the end, which I believe it with Ozzy because he pretty much said exactly that. But I like if that was Tiffany's plan, what does that say about Tiffany? Because I'm already discounting Ozzy completely from like being worthy enough to win this season if he would want to bring Suri. But if that was Tiffany's plan too, that makes me kind of question where her head was at of whether she thought she had a chance to win or she just wanted to be there with Suri and Ozzy. But I mean, we won't know that because that's not what we got. But like we kind of what got us onto this conversation though probably was going to be the right move to take out Aubrey there instead of Suri and then bring Suri to a final five and see what happens there.
Yeah, I think to put a capstone on it, the current era and iteration of Survivor is all about positioning. It's not about big moves. We've left the big move era well in the past. Just don't be too out in front. Make sure you bring people you can beat in challenges when you need to, and don't piss people off. Or if you do, be so charming that it doesn't matter. I think that, that's basically what my opinion on everything right now is.
Yeah, I think that don't piss people off for me. I would say like command respect, right?
Yeah.
Like I think that to me, like I've always like in the like winning a jury vote discussion, I've always leaned more towards people will vote for who they respect versus who they like. I think Savannah last season was a big example of that. I think a lot of people
That's a good point.
did not personally like Savannah, but they did respect a lot of what she was doing. They respected her challenge wins. They respected her tenacity. They respected the fact that she like fought from the bottom. The fact that she kept on getting targeted and surviving. Like there was kind of like a begrudging respect almost from a lot of the jurors that season for her. So I think that that's kind of like the biggest thing is like you just have to like command more respect than the two people that you're sitting next to. Yeah, which is why I think like if you're talking about like best player doesn't always win, it's really hard to quantify who the best player is on Survivor because it's an edited show. But like if I would say like who is the best player for a season, it would be like who do I think had the most win equity at the most key points of the season. And like if I'm looking at this season, if we're assuming that in this final three of Rizzo, Joe, Jonathan, that Rizzo is the favored to win based off of this final tribal council performance, then I think that Rizzo just had the most win equity in this endgame somehow, and like kind of botched it a little bit, which I think is similar to his story on 49. I think he also made some like very marginal unforced errors in the endgame of 49 that put him into a position where he had less win equity. But like I think in both seasons he's like a coin flip away from winning, which is
I do fear
crazy.
that Rizzo may not have the respect of this particular jury.
I agree. I think he does have more respect than Jonathan and Joe, though, which is all you need.
Right?
Fair. Like again,
it's a good point. Yeah, I mean, I wish that Jeff did the thing that he used to do at reunions where he was like, if Rizzo made the finals, who would you have voted for, jury? So we
Mhm.
could at least get somewhat of an idea. Obviously,
Well, he would have
an
fucked it
idea
up though,
that's
and he would
heavily
have been like, if Rizzo was here instead of Jonathan, who would you have voted for? And then like everyone would have raised their hands for Aubrey.
yeah. Okay,
so-
that's fair. That's fair.
But yeah, like the more interesting question, obviously, is who wins if Aubrey isn't there and Rizzo is there.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I don't know. Again, and this is why I think Aubrey, like this is like the kind of the Aubrey blueprint, right? This is the new era blueprint, right? Like you just have to be like the third least respected player in the like final 9.
Yeah. And not be too much of a threat somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
All right,
we'll see.
well-
We'll see what 51 is going to turn into. Whoever has the gobbledygook idol that they
Mhm.
found, on Exile Island, which is also was presented to them by fucking Conan O'Brien. So I guess we'll see what happens with 51. I didn't mean to come across that aggressive when I started that.
I mean,
but,
you're
that,
right.
that could happen. I do love Coco though. So if it is actually Conan O'Brien, I'd be very excited about that. But maybe that's the hypocrite in me, I guess. So we can get Coco on the show instead of Jimmy Fallon.
Yeah, we already did Ghost Island. Like we already did a similar theme of like the past of survivors coming back to haunt people. Like whatever. You know what? The preview made it look like that there are going to be 2 tribes, even though we know that there's 21 people. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah.
Do we think somebody
Also,
gets
yellow
eliminated?
versus purple. Great color matchup.
I'm going to save it, but I'm going to ask it now. But I'll save it. But
Okay.
maybe somebody gets eliminated in the opening challenge, and that's how
Yeah, I
we get
think
two
I
tribes
think
up
there might be some fuckery about like that,
Have
which we'll be
Jonathan
here
Wanda.
to complain about it in September.
Yeah, I know. You'd mentioned a possible Jonathan and Wanda situation, which is a twist that they have done. Obviously, they did it to Jonathan and Wanda, where they like all live on the beach for the first night, and then the morning of day 2, they do a schoolyard pick, and then whoever doesn't get picked is automatically eliminated.
It was horrible then. It will be horrible now.
Yep.
The only other thing I wanted to call out, giving Aubrey a car after she just won $2 million, pretty ridiculous. Giving Suri that weird award, also a little strange, but then again, and it's not much different than the movie industry handing out Oscars. So I guess Survivor Awards, if they want to do that, that's they can keep doing that.
Also, like Amber won the car as much as Aubrey did. If we're gonna say they won the car, so I feel like Amber. Merge their names. I feel like Amber really broke the car curse all the way back on All Stars. If we're, being fair here.
Yeah. Well, the whole like this is. I mean, it was I guess neat that Jeff like acknowledged the car curse.
Yeah.
Because like like it's not. I don't think it's very often that he kind of acknowledges kind of like niche old school fan references like that. The whole premise of the car curse is like somebody wins the car, and that often like kind of just pisses everyone off and makes them want to vote them out of spite.
Yeah, and Amber got a spouse too. She really won, and she did. They're still together now. They have a beautiful family. Like nobody won more than Amber in Survivor history.
No.
Yeah. What's her spouse's name? Robbie. Robert.
Bob, something like
Boston
that.
Bobber, yeah.
Boston
By the way, where the fuck was everybody tonight? We got some quick glimpses of like Tina and Ethan. We saw that. Like, where's Boston Rob? Where's Parvati? Where's Tony? Where's Sandra? Where are all these people? It didn't ultimately matter because they weren't going to talk to any of them. There is some fun stuff on TikTok with the cast, like them taking the bus over, them all singing and dancing together. We got some like that funny clip of Rizzo and Charlie, doing like a heated rivalry kind of joke thing. So I guess like we're in just in that stage now, or we're just gonna see it all on TikTok and Instagram, and they don't have any interest in doing the show.
It was great. Davey on Davey from David versus Goliath was showing behind the scenes. He showed Rob and Tyson hugging, so Rob was there. But the show didn't acknowledge it. I don't know why you invite your winners if you don't acknowledge them, but
It was a
What
it was a
do I-
glorified watch party, ultimately. Like, it was not a reunion show, which, as somebody that doesn't care about reunion shows, I was looking forward to seeing what they would do here. And so I am very, very, very disappointed about that. I said Ozzy looked like he was Kenny Powers with the goatee when they were at Final Trouble. I thought that was funny. I did think Jeff recovered very, very well and showed he's a real pro when it matters when the mix-up occurred with Rizzo and the Tribal. So shout out Jeff there. I did think that was impressive, because when you've been doing it as long as him, I got a little nervous. Jeff is old, getting up there. Sometimes the brain dwindles away when you get to that age. But I'm glad that it seemed more so that was a production error and not just Jeff starting to lose
It
it.
definitely wasn't Jeff who lined up all the jury members on the stage.
Very, very funny though. Kind of just like, I think it helped the fire making challenge. Honestly, like I said, I don't think it was manufactured purposely, but I think that it kind of helped what would have been a very kind of boring and tough watch to watch Rizzo go through that.
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting thing that happened in an otherwise kind of bland finale. So
Yeah, right.
Yep.
And it did go viral, like you said, Dylan. I saw all kinds of accounts. It was on live stream fails, like it was everywhere.
Yeah,
Which actually is a live stream fail. So instead of just petty drama. So again, back to their roots.
Yeah,
That's it.
All right. Well, this has been a really fun season. Dylan, sorry you didn't like the ending of that much. Hopefully by September, it's kind of left you. The bad taste in your mouth has gone away. And, like a toxic ex, you're right back in with Survivor. But anything that you guys wanted to add that we haven't talked about yet?
Well, we're still doing stuff this summer. We haven't fully fleshed out what we're doing. I am towards the end. I think I have 2 episodes left of Micronesia. Really enjoying it. I think that's also kind of skewed last night too, because I find Micronesia ultimately, I think it's a good season, not a great season, but it's been entertaining, and the Black Widow Brigade and all that has been good. But I think we'll find stuff to talk about this summer. We're not going to wait until September to preview 51. We'll find things to discuss. Maybe hopefully find somebody to interview this summer. Maybe a few people to interview. I think that could be really good. I'm going
to try to get Justin from Pizza Justin from 48. I think that's an obtainable former cast member that we could get to start with.
I think I'm going to try to guilt fellow Dragon Slayer tribe member Coach to come in the pod for not getting our recording.
Huge, obviously.
So that would be very nice. I think we're going to have a good summer. We're not done. I plan on rewatching Survivor all summer, kind of all the seasons I haven't seen yet. So that's I think that'll be fun to talk about. But no, regardless of my feelings of last night, this has been a really great season. Shout out Brian Wong, Scott, Lauren, Daryl, Brent. It's been a really fun season. I think that this was the highlight of season 50 for me, was everything with the podcast and kind of just how fun actually being together and watching it and discussing all this has been. So that's kind of what I'm leaving 50 with. And I think that, if that was the best takeaway, I think that's pretty good for us. So I want to keep building on the momentum for 51. I hope that it won't be, a disaster. I hope that we have a lot of good to talk about. I'm rooting for it. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah. Crazy to watch the sequel season of Micronesia and Australian Survivor versus the World First, then going back to see the original.
I'm a real aristocrat like that.
Yeah, it's like the machete order of Star Wars.
Starting with Attack of the Clones.
Yeah, starting with Attack of the Clones, exactly.
And then jumping over to Force Awakens.
Ben, anything you wanted to add before we get out of here?
No. I really enjoyed the season. I thought that, while it kind of ended on like a little bit of a kind of a wart note, it did have a lot of high highs and probably the highest highs that we've had in the new era. So I'll always keep that in mind. I thought the cast ended up being ultimately really good. I know we had been kind of on and off about whether the cast was going to be good. I think that we had some contentions about certain people being cast or not being cast. I think ultimately it was largely a very well cast season. I hope that it encourages more frequent returning player seasons in the future. Not too frequent. I hope they don't overcorrect and do them too frequently. But yeah, like every 5-ish seasons, I would be happy to see a returning player season. Yeah, excited for Big Brother 28 coming up here in less than 2 months. I assume
excited.
I assume roughly in like a month or so we'll get that cast. So yeah, we're gonna have Brian and I will have a very short month or so off from covering reality TV, and then we'll be back for 90 days of summer or whatever it is, for hopefully a really fun season of Big Brother. The last 2 seasons of Big Brother have been pretty good. So I hope that continues. And yeah, that's all I have to say.
Yeah. I'm going to try to watch From in the next month before Big Brother starts. Then when Big Brother is here, I'm going to be so into it. I'm going to be making videos on, is it the GameBots channel? Or maybe it's the Have Not Room channel. We have a lot of channels, but we'll be covering it back to front. GameBots on TikTok. Follow us there. And yeah, I had so much fun this season. Like, you guys are the best co-hosts a guy could ask for, and I am so excited to continue this momentum into the summer with more Blindsiders episodes, more Wicked Good Show episodes, and more Have Not Room episodes, and hopefully some game streams. We say it a lot, but we gotta actually do some gaming streams. So count on that. Ben and I talked about playing Overwatch before this. Maybe we can rope Jenny to stream Overwatch with us in tow as she carries us. But other than that, I really appreciate everybody who came on this season. We're not the biggest podcast. We don't have any connections. We're just 3 guys who are very passionate about it. And yeah, thank you so much. We'll see you soon for interviews and stuff like that. But if you're not into that, we'll see you for Survivor 51 in the fall.